Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Passive Note Investing for Your Self-Directed IRA, presented by Next Generation and Earnest Investing. My name is Erica Figueredo. I'm the marketing specialist here at Next Generation. And before we get started, I want to review some housekeeping items with you guys, give you some information about Next Generation, and introduce our speakers. So as always, today's session is being recorded for anyone who didn't get a chance to make it live, and for those of you who are joining today that want to watch the session again. So if you're here with us live, it's great to have you. And with that, everyone joining today's session is going to be automatically muted for the entirety of the session. However, that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. So I'd like for you guys to take a couple of seconds to find your Zoom control panel. It's likely on the bottom of your screen. And the two features I want everyone to pay attention to are questions and chat. So if you have any questions during today's session, please use the questions tab. And any other conversations, feedback, etc., issues can go into the chat tab. That's also where I would like you guys to introduce yourselves. Let us know who you are, where you're from, what brings you here today, and anything else that you may find relevant or important. We really want to keep this as engaging as possible, so feel free to chat amongst yourselves. So to tell you a bit about Next Generation. Next Generation is a custodian and administrator for self-directed retirement plans. And these plans are much like the plans that you would find at any brokerage like Fidelity, Charles Schwab, Edward Jones. The only difference between us and them being the types of investments that can be held within the accounts. So instead of investing in stocks and bonds and other publicly traded assets, self-directed IRAs give investors the opportunity to hold alternative investments within a tax-advantaged retirement vehicle. These accounts can often provide a hedge against stock market volatility. They allow investors to diversify their retirement portfolios, and they give individuals added control over their investment returns by investing in what they know best. Next Generation is a women-owned business and was established in 2004. There's currently two main arms of our business. The first is our administrative arm and headquarters, Next Generation Services, located in Roseland, New Jersey. Next Generation Services handles all of the back office administration, record keeping, mandatory tax reporting, and transaction support for all of our client accounts. And Next Generation Trust Company, located in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, is a licensed chartered trust company serving as custodian for all of our accounts. So to give you our very, very necessary disclaimer on what we don't do, Next Generation is not a bank or fiduciary, so we don't provide any financial, tax, legal, or investment advice. Next Generation also does not endorse, recommend, or review the merits of any investment. So any information provided on today's webinar is for educational purposes only. For today's conversation, we have our co-host, Nathan Turner. You want to give a wave? He's the manager of Earnest Investing. Alongside him, we have our very own Scott Ritchie. Scott, give a wave. Next Generation's business development specialist. I'll give them a couple of moments to introduce themselves so you can get to know them a little bit better. So Nathan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here today. This is it's always fun. I can go for hours and hours talking about notes. I'm going to try to keep it brief because I'm sure people have things to do with their day other than sit here and listen. But brief introduction of myself. Probably the most notable thing about me is I live in Canada. All of my business, everything that I've done, all of my work has been in the US since 2008. I haven't done anything in Canada for a number of years now, 14 years. I just live in Canada. So it's right off the bat, it's a testament that you can do the note business from anywhere. You don't even have to be in the same country. You can be outside of the country and still do the note business in the US, and it's a ton of fun. I started out with real estate investing, like a lot of people that come into notes. And I did that in 05, 06, 07. And then when things took a sudden turn in 2008, I became a landlord for the first time. I was flipping properties and I got stuck with one of them and I had to rent it out. I did not like being a landlord. I liked the cash flow, but I didn't like anything else involved with being a landlord. It was a lot of work. It was really tough. It was from across the country, so it wasn't even local, and it was a big challenge. I kind of networked my way into notes. I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but really the bottom line is I kind of fell in love with it. I found the same cash flow that I liked from rentals without any of the headaches that came along with being a landlord. And so that was fantastic. I've been doing this really, I got my start in 2008. I bought my first non-performing note, which we'll talk about in a little bit, in 2010. And I've just been building since then. Last year, I opened up a fund, SEC 506 Regulation D fund, and we're operating that way now, and it's been great. So I'm out raising capital for that, and having just a wonderful time. That's kind of my very brief introduction for myself.
Thank you, Nathan. Over to you, Scott. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, thank you, Erica. And Nathan, thank you again for joining us today. We're excited about this presentation. My name is Scott. I am a business development specialist here at Next Generation. I will be coming up on my 3rd year anniversary, so I've been here from quite some time. Obviously, it's been somewhat of a challenge going through this whole COVID epidemic while working, but we are coming back to the office here at Next Generation. We've been out for quite some time working remotely. I've been in the financial services business for more than 10 years, and I have more than 15 years of sales experience. I've also worked in media relations, public relations, and human capital management. So a lot of those previous employment opportunities that I had have served me well here at Next Generation. So like I said, I'm glad Nathan is here, and I'm looking forward to working on this webinar with him today.
Thank you. And I guess with that being said, Scott, take it away.
All right, back to me again. All right, well, Nathan, thank you again. It's nice to talk to a Canadian.
Yeah.
But and it's funny because I remember you had said when we had first connected, you, I think, had a conference in Nashville, which is one of my favorite places.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you do that, but maybe next year we'll be attendees at that conference if you do it.
That'd be great. I'm looking at hotels now. We're going to be booking something here very soon.
Fantastic. All right, so let me start. How about an introduction? You said you worked in real estate as a landlord, and then you kind of got into mortgage notes.
Yeah.
So if you want to expand on that with a little bit of introduction into mortgage note investing and what really, brought you into a little more specific than you were in your intro.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's fun when I tell people what I do. I tell them that I buy mortgages all over the country, and I get one of two reactions. One is like, oh, and it obviously it's way over their heads and they don't want to admit it. Or they say, wait a second, so what does that mean? And we get into more of a conversation. But essentially, note investing is, like I say, it's all the benefits of cash flow of being a landlord without any of the headaches. So essentially, I'm the bank. I will buy a mortgage from a bank, indirectly usually, but something that was originated by whatever, Bank of America, Chase, name one. And then I will end up being the one that is collecting payments on that. So the way I got started in that was, like I say, kind of networked into it. Back in 2008, when everything went hairy, I got involved with a group that had bought a portfolio of properties that they had intended to just flip out and sell to another investor. And then everything changed very suddenly, and they got stuck with this portfolio of properties, 60 properties roughly, mostly in the Midwest, kind of spread out a little bit. And they didn't know what to do with them. They were all based in California. They had no idea what to do with these Midwest properties. And I kind of got roped into this whole project. So these were distressed properties, mostly in the Midwest. I went ahead and did a tour of all these properties, driving around. And my old partner and I, we thought we'd kind of invented seller financing. We thought that this was something that we had figured out, where we could sell properties based on monthly payments. And to a couple of Canadians, that sounded like a pretty novel idea. The more and more we got into it, the more we realized this is a much bigger business than we realized. We figured out how to do it properly, and started buying non-performing in 2010. and just the power of non-performer. It's a great position to be in when you are the bank. So I don't have any direct liability to the property. Instead, I just have the responsibility for the mortgage. That property is my collateral, and I can do whatever I need to do with the collateral if I need to. But ideally, I never actually own the property. That's like I say, it's kind of long and convoluted, and I apologize if I'm not making a ton of sense.
Oh, that's great. But that's great, because it leads me to my next question. So what are underperforming mortgage notes?
Yeah, people have lives. Lives are sometimes complicated. Everybody's got a story. Typically, when somebody is not paying on their mortgage, it's for a few different reasons. Either there's some kind of death in the family, or the individual, a divorce, or a loss of job. Those are kind of the three top reasons that people stop paying their mortgage. At that point, the bank is in kind of a tough spot, because they're not set up to own property. The kind of the flow of how that would go is the bank could foreclose on the property, take it back, and then sell the house to recoup their cost. That's fine. But like I say, they're not really set up for that in the first place. And then when you had something like 2008 happen, where there were thousands and thousands of defaults all of a sudden, banks were in a real pickle. They didn't know what to do with all of these potential properties that they were not set up to own. So rather than go through that whole process, it's time consuming, it's expensive, and they're not set up for it. They would sell the loan off to somebody else. So that kind of makes it a way around to me, where I'm a lot more flexible than a bank, and I can go in and talk to the homeowner and say, so what's the situation? What's going on? How can we fix this? I learned a line from a fellow that most people haven't heard of, Bill Bartman, who used to buy a credit card debt. He passed away a few years ago, but I read his book. And the line that I took from him was, the only thing we can't do is nothing. And I thought, that's brilliant. So that I use that line all the time, where I'm talking to a borrower and I say, so obviously you're not making payments. We're in trouble here. The only thing we can't do is nothing. So either we need to start making payments, and we can modify it to make whatever needs to happen so that they can make payments, or we need to talk about them moving out. 95% of the time, if somebody's in trouble and I can talk to them, we can work something out, and we get them on some kind of a payment plan, and they're able to stay in their home. That's ideal, and that's kind of what we're shooting for. So that's one of the fun things about the business.
So in what way would an investor be able to find out about, how to invest in a mortgage note? Whether underperforming, or, I guess there's a variety of mortgage notes out there. We're obviously addressing underperforming today, but I guess from a general perspective.
Right, and you bring up a good point. Not all mortgages are non-performing. I buy a lot of the non-performing. I like those. They're fun and they're interesting to work with. But I also buy performing notes where people are making regular payments, and great. And that may be better suited to an IRA. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But the way to learn about this, there are several people teaching it. I'm not one of them. I'd be happy to refer you to somebody who is teaching. And they'd be happy to share their knowledge. There's a lot of really good teachers out there, and I'm more than happy to share if people want to reach out afterwards. But it is important that you get some kind of an education. There are a lot of rules. There are different rules than real estate. Just because you come from a real estate background does not mean that you can automatically step into notes. It's a different world. So it's important to learn those rules and make sure that you're being compliant with everything that's out there.
Well, I guess this is a good segue into your next question, because you had started to reference what we do, self-directed IRAs, but how can notes fit into a passive investment strategy?
So ideally, like we say, you're going to get if it's a non-performing note, you're going to get them reperforming, where they're making regular payments again. Or you can just pick up something that is making regular payments and then just continue to collect those regular payments. This can be a really great passive investment, with a little bit of a caveat there, that you have to know what to do if something goes wrong. It's great when they're making payments and you don't have to do anything. And you generally speaking, the way that this works is you have what's called a servicer. The servicer is the one who actually collects the payments on your behalf. They can be a full service business for you. So if something does go wrong, they will handle all the borrower communication, the person living in the house, and they can take care of all of that. At the same time, if you just buy a note without any kind of education, without any kind of knowledge about what you're actually purchasing, if and when something does go wrong, the servicer, at the very least, they need some direction. And if you don't know exactly what you're doing, that's going to be difficult to offer that. That being said, if they continue to make payments and they're just doing that, then it's a very passive, very easy thing to do. You're collecting somebody's mortgage payment, and that's kind of the bottom line. You're not responsible as the bank. You're not responsible for fixing toilets or the roof or cutting the grass. None of that's your problem. You're the bank. Banks don't do that kind of thing. Homeowners do that stuff. So it can be a really, really great passive investment.
Now, so I guess to expand on that again a little bit more, underperforming mortgage notes would probably then would you consider them a good strategy for self-directed IRA investment?
I think that they can be. And again, as long as you've got some kind of education, you know what you're doing, then yeah, I think this can be great. And it's actually kind of leads me into a little bit about IRAs is what you can and can't do. So for example, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that in an IRA, you cannot own real estate. Is that right?
No, you can own real estate.
You can own real estate. Okay, so then you're okay. Okay.
Yeah, you can definitely own real estate. And I'll get into some of the cans and cans in a little bit, but yeah, you can own real estate. Actually, real estate is one of the largest, maybe the largest percentage of self-directed IRAs out there are invested in real estate. But it's very, believe it or not, and I'll get into it. I don't want to kind of overlap what you're doing, but it's interesting. But yes, real estate can be used for self-directed IRAs.
Okay, well that's perfect then.
Back in,
yeah,
because I do want to make a clarification. Kind of going back to what I said earlier in our introduction. There's two different types of custodians. So you have like your Fidelities of the world that are, your traditional brokerage houses. They'll let you invest in stocks and bonds and mutual funds and ETFs and anything that's publicly traded. So at the end of the day, if you go to a Fidelity and you say, hey, I want to invest in real estate, no, we can't hold that. However, if you go to a custodian, a self-directed custodian like Next Generation, you can invest in those alternatives, real estate, private equity, notes, and different types of lending, precious metals, cryptocurrency, a lot of the things that really aren't available to you in that traditional market. So that kind of opens up this new world of opportunity. So the answer to that question is yes and no, depending on who your custodian is. So we always like to make that determination because in certain places you can't, but with us you can.
Okay, so then assuming you're with Next Generation, then yes, this is a great, it's a great strategy.
Yep, for sure.
And make no mistake, especially with an underperforming or non-performing, there's work involved. So if you're buying one that's non-performing and you just think, oh, set it and forget it, even if you've got the servicer doing everything, there are decisions to be made. There are things that you have to do and know to be able to go forward. And so I don't want to have rose-colored glasses on this one. There's work involved. But that being said, man, I love notes. I hope to do this for the rest of my life. It's a lot of fun. It's really interesting. Everybody's got a story. It feels really good to be able to help people where they're in some kind of problem situation. The bank, has their parameters and their box is relatively small, and they have a really hard time seeing outside that box. And as an investor, our box is much bigger and we're much more flexible, and we can help people figure out whatever situation they're in. And like I say, 95% of the time we can get them making payments again and staying in their home. And it's really fun and really rewarding. and profitable, which is, definition of a business.
That's
So,
great.
bottom line, yes.
Well, good. I mean, it's important, obviously you got to love what you do, and you absolutely do. You can tell by the way you're talking about it. Is there anything else that you want to add that we may not have covered yet?
So the other thing I'll kind of throw out there and just to say is that, yes, you can totally do this on your own, and you can do this within your own IRA. Or if you think, I understand there's a lot of things to know and a lot of things to learn and all those kind of things, and you're busy and you've got your full time and you're at your limit of what you can handle, there are tons of people you can partner with. That's what I do. I can help you out with other people where you can partner with them, have them do all the work, people that are experienced and know what they're doing. And you can still be investing in notes without having to do all the work. There's still really good returns to be had. I'd love to, offline, we can talk about that more if anybody's interested in going in with me, but if it's not with me, somebody else. There's lots of people that are really good at this and they know what they're doing. And yet there's things that you need to know. So if that's overwhelming, that's okay. There are other ways to invest.
It's really good information, Nathan. I really appreciate you providing our audience with that topical stuff. It's really great. And, your contact information will be available. So if anybody has any questions and they haven't asked one yet, you'll definitely be able to get in contact with Nathan. So definitely take advantage of that, because that sounds like.
Let's actually get that out of the way now. I know that I normally save it for the end, but for the sake of the people that are not here with us live, that may be watching something recorded, it's easier to verbalize that. So Nathan, if you don't mind, just take a second and just shout out your contact info. Sure,
you bet. So my office number, it's on my cell. It's 312-860-3747. It's a Chicago number. I found it was more effective to have people answer the phone when it was a US number. So that's my office number, or you can email me, nathan@earnestinvesting.com. That's Ernest with an A.
Thank you. Okay, so I think at this point of the conversation, we're ready to flip things over.
Yeah.
I know, Nathan, you might have some questions for Scott, for us, about self-directed IRAs. So let's take it away.
Right. So there's probably people on the call here, or people that are going to be tuning in later, that are new to IRAs and they've heard about it, but don't really know anything about it. I've talked to people over the last few years where I say, so this is great with your IRA. And they say, oh, I don't have one. And I think, well, then hurry up, get one, because it's a great investment vehicle. But Scott, tell us, what is a self-directed IRA?
Absolutely, Nathan. It's always good to start at the very basics. And, a self-directed IRA really is no different. It's different, but not different than a regular IRA. And what I mean by that is if you're self-directing an IRA, you're investing in different kinds of assets, okay? You're investing in non-traditional assets. Erica touched on it. Sometimes we refer to them as alternative assets that are not publicly traded. However, it's still an IRA, so it's still set by the same guidelines for opening an IRA, transferring funds into an IRA, et cetera. You can have a traditional IRA be self-directed. You can have a Roth IRA be self-directed. So you have the opportunity with those IRAs. People often come to us, oh, can I self-direct? I want to change to a self-directed IRA. It's not different than your other IRA. The mechanism of how it invests is different. But the IRA itself is just the same way the IRS created it. In fact, it's been around since ERISA. So the self-directed IRA sometimes needs a little bit of an explanation, because it's really not a whole lot different conceptually than a regular IRA. What you can do with it is what makes it different.
So do you have to open a separate account to make it self-directed, or it's the same thing?
Well, you would open a separate account with a custodian like Next Generation, because as Erica alluded to earlier, most traditional wirehouses do not do self-directed IRAs. And sometimes they'll say they will, and that leads to a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
But you need a custodian like Next Generation that does a self-directed IRA. A Fidelity, a Schwab, they don't do that.
Got it. Okay. And then I know there's rules around IRAs, things you can and cannot do. Can you tell us about that? What are some things you can do? What are things you can't?
Can, I guess, pertaining to investments, and Erica again touched on a little bit before, we're talking about notes. You can definitely invest in mortgage notes. You can invest in real estate. You can invest in cryptocurrency. You can invest in precious metals. You could, let's see, private equity, hedge funds. There's a lot you can do. Sometimes it's easier when we go the other way. What can't you do? You can't do collectibles. You can't do life insurance. You know, those are things that you can't do. Commodities you can't do. The reason why collectibles is tough for evaluation, you know, because of the, you know, right, trying to figure out what the value really is. But you can almost do anything. And, you know, mortgages, like you said, you can lend money from your IRA to other people, so you can become your own mortgage person to someone else, theoretically. You can do hard money lending. So there's so many opportunities out there. And we have a very good compliance department. So a lot of times people will come to us and say, can I do this? And we'll do our due diligence and we'll let them know, yes, you can, or no, you can't. So there's things out there where people can invest in that gives them an opportunity, you know, to create passive income, and self-directed IRAs are a great way to do that.
Okay. And then the other thing that probably most people have heard of is the term prohibited transaction. So what is a prohibited transaction, and what's an example of that?
Well, a prohibited transaction is actually, it's the thing that we most educate our subscribers about, because that's the thing you want to most avoid. And what prohibited transaction is, it's when a plan and a disqualified person engage in a transaction. And that's prohibited by law, hence prohibited transaction. And the consequences of that are you would lose the value of your IRA from a protected, like its IRA status would be lost. So all that money now would become regular income and it gets distributed. And then it becomes, you know, could become somewhat problematic for a lot of reasons. You get penalties, et cetera. So you want to avoid prohibited transactions at all costs. Now, there's three types of prohibited transaction. There's a per se prohibited transaction. There's an extension of credit prohibited transaction, and there's also a self-dealing prohibited transaction. A per se prohibited transaction is when an IRA engages in a transaction with what's called a disqualified person. Disqualified people are IRA holders and their spouses, ascendants and descendants, meaning parents, grandparents, children, etc., fiduciaries, business partners, and things like that. Now, a lot of times, part of our role is educating. So we'll make sure when we're asking people who want to open up a self-directed IRA, we'll get as much information as possible. What kind, you know, what are you interested in opening a self-directed IRA for? What would you like to invest with? Who are you looking to partner with, et cetera? All those things can help us determine whether it could be potentially a prohibited transaction. If it becomes a prohibited transaction, then sometimes you have to get legal people involved, lawyers, and sometimes that could lead to you know, fees, additional fees, and things like that. So sometimes you can, some of these lawyers are really good, and they can stop the prohibited transaction or quote unquote fix it, but it's really difficult to do. So our job is to try to find it before it happens, because we don't want any of our clients to be you know, subjected to have that happen to them, because that just wouldn't be a good thing. And then go back to a couple examples. Buying property, a per se prohibited transaction, if you bought property from a disqualified person, meaning, you know, if your son bought a house that your IRA owned, that's a per se prohibited transaction. Okay. If someone lent their wife $10,000 from their IRA, well, that would be considered an extension of credit. That's another type of prohibited transaction. Okay. And then self-dealing, which is the third prohibited transaction, that would be like if a realtor sold a piece of property to the IRA and then they took a commission off of that. So that would be considered, like, because they're benefiting personally, so that's considered a self-dealing. So those are the three main types of prohibited transactions. So again, our purpose here is we're making sure that any of our customers don't engage in those, and we try to educate them all along the way, so to make sure that they don't do it. And that's why part of our fact-finding information, when they're looking to come on board, we try to get as much information as possible. So that's our goal, to prohibit, or to stop a prohibited transaction from happening.
And I've heard the penalties for that, like if it's determined that you did do a prohibited transaction, the penalties are pretty stiff. Like
Well, right.
it's not like $100 fine or something like that. It's
Well, the biggest penalty is no longer an IRA. So if you have $100,000 in your IRA and you commit a prohibited transaction, then that money, that 100,000 is no longer, it's not a tax qualified plan anymore. So that 100,000 gets distributed to you or whomever committed it, and that becomes taxable income. And if they're not 59 and a half yet, they're going to be subject to distribution penalties, et cetera. So, the prohibited transaction is the thing we want to most avoid in setting up someone with a self-directed IRA.
Yeah, it's a big deal. So yeah, make sure.
Yeah,
So if you have questions, ask.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So the tax savings on this are fantastic. So how does somebody go ahead and set up an account? And what does that look like? Is that a complicated process, or is it just some documents, or how does that go?
Yeah, it's paperwork. DocuSign. DocuSign is our main source of applications. But our process itself, we use a timeline of 3 to 6 weeks. The reason why we do that is because there's certain variables that are out of our control. Primarily getting the asset from where it currently is over to us. So for instance, if someone will open up an account, they submit an application. Today is Tuesday. If I got an application today, I'd review it, I'd submit it for approval. It would get approved by tomorrow afternoon. So, okay, their account is now open. The next step, our transaction team then works with them in moving the funding over. Like I said, that's the variable, because the other custodian that has the money, we don't know that timeline. We don't know how soon they'll release those funds. Obviously, if it's a contribution, they can just cut us a check. Obviously, it's going to move more expeditiously. But if it's not, we're at the whim of the other custodian. And then the final step is, once we get the funding and they're ready to execute the investment, our compliance team does a little review. They look at the operating agreement and some of the other documentation pertaining to the investment, and then they will go ahead and execute the investment. And that, we say it's a 2 to 5 day compliance review. Generally, it doesn't take more than 2 days. If it's a little more complicated transaction, it might, but generally it doesn't. So in a perfect world, it could be done in as little as 2 weeks. But like I said, 3 to 6 weeks is the timeline we go with. We'd like to get it done as fast as possible, but because we have it, 3 steps in the process, that's the amount of time it usually takes.
Okay. That's not bad. That's not bad. Okay. And then let's say somebody does want to go ahead and invest their IRA funds. What kind of documentation is, again, everything's got to be, properly documented. So what does that look like? And then what kind of timeline is that to get the fund, like the deal funded?
Well, again, depending on how you're planning on funding it, that's going to have an impact on the timeline. But once the funding is here and we're ready to make the investment, our transaction team, like in your particular case, they'd be looking for some sort of convertible note or some other kind of note document that'll reference what it is they're looking to do. They're going to request a certificate of good standing from where, the investment they're going to be putting the money into. That's really important. They'll probably have a private placement investment notice. That's very typical in most of our transactions. And, sometimes they want to talk to the usury laws. It's a promissory note, and different states have different laws. So it's sometimes important to know which state, obviously, whatever state you're working in, getting those documents correct or accurate to the usury laws and setting the terms of your loan.
Okay. And then what kind of a timeline is that for the turnaround? That depends on the applicant, how quickly they can get that in. Our transaction team lets them know, like once the account is open and they work with them in getting the funding,
they also let them know these are the documents that we require. And they even include like wire instructions for getting the funds moved over and things like that. They talk about our fee schedule and things like that. So that's all important things that get addressed by our transaction team once we're ready to move forward.
Okay. All right, good. That's good. I think that's all of my questions. But that's good information. I hope that people, as a Canadian, I'm not eligible for an IRA. All we have in Canada, the equivalent in Canada is called a TFSA, a tax-free savings account. And I actually am limited only to publicly traded things. So I don't get the self-direction. So I'm a huge proponent of the IRA because you have that ability that I don't have.
Well, you know, it's interesting with IRAs. Well, first of all, if you make money in the US, you are eligible to open one. That's one thing.
Really?
Yes. If you have an income earned in the United States, you could definitely open one. Well, actually, you know what? Check the IRS guidelines, but I'm pretty sure that's accurate.
Okay.
The other thing, a lot of IRA money, especially the higher balances, come from people who had other jobs and changed jobs. So it was from a 401k, a 403b. The assets accumulated in those retirement plans. And then when they left that particular job, they rolled it into their IRA. So we're dealing with a lot of clients that have fairly large IRA balances. Now, again, you can also fund your IRA by contribution, but the contribution amounts are much lower, and it's going to take a good amount of time. And, you know, in the US, and I'm not sure real estate values in Canada, but in the US, you need at least a few bucks in your account to buy some real estate. It's not cheap. Yeah. So although we do also, and I'll throw this out there, because I think it's important, the ability to invest internationally is also an opportunity for people who have self-directed IRAs. Okay. We did have a client that invested in a Latin American country in some real estate. So as long as all the documentation is accurate, and we definitely we're a very meticulous organization in terms of looking at all the documentations. Like, we definitely dot our I's and cross our T's, because prohibited transactions are, you know, we want to do our best to make sure everybody who comes to us client-wise, they know they're getting in a situation that's going to be totally copacetic with what they're looking to do. So right. No red flags after the fact. That's our goal. So that's why we're so adamant about our transaction and doing it right.
Yeah, definitely. So just to touch on one thing, a question that I get all the time is, how much money do I need to get started in notes? And going back, you know, how much money do you have to have in your IRA to get started with notes? I've bought notes for myself for as little as $500 with like a $2,000 balance. Those exist. I wouldn't necessarily recommend those to somebody who's getting started. So it varies wildly, and, you know, anywhere from $500 to, you know, $50,000 is the minimum for investing into my fund. You can easily spend, you know, over $100,000 on one note if you're doing this on your own. So it varies wildly, but you're probably going to want, you know, I would say in the neighborhood of $50,000 just to get started. And like I say, whether that's with me or somebody else or on your own, you're going to need some money.
That's a great point. I want to bring it up because you said it into one of your funds. So you can buy them directly just as an individual, or you can invest into a fund.
Right.
And how do you find those? Like, those funds are, you know, with a self-directed IRA, you can invest in private equity, but you can't invest in anything publicly traded. Are there private equity funds out there of underperforming notes?
Yeah, definitely. So my fund is performing notes and non-performing notes. And, you know, I think I said earlier, we pay out an 8% return on that. A great way to meet people initially, I would say, it would be really on Facebook. There are Facebook groups on notes, and people share information all the time. Another really great thing that I encourage people to do is to get out and meet people in person. There are half a dozen different note conferences every year. I actually purchased one this year. I'm going to be the host starting next year. And so I'm looking for hotels and that kind of thing. We talked about that beginning for a second. So I'm putting that on for a gathering place for people that are into notes or getting started in notes. And it's a great way to kind of get some networking at the very least and some education. You'll find if you do start talking to note people, you'll find that people in notes are willing to share pretty much anything and everything. There are not a lot of secrets in the business. The biggest secret is where you find them. And that would be a conversation that we would do offline. We wouldn't talk about that one publicly.
And actually, just one point of clarification. I've kind of been referring to them as underperforming notes, and you're referring to them as non-performing notes. Is that essentially the same thing? Just because if I'm saying it wrong, I'd love to get it corrected.
There are levels, right? So there's oftentimes the underperforming, they're often referred to as scratch and dent. So that's an example where somebody, missed 1 month and then they make it up the next month or something like that. But it's not, it's not a perfect pay history. There are there's the perfect pay history where they're just making regular payments for the last, 5-10 years. And then there's the non-performing. And technically anything where there's a note where it misses 3 consecutive payments, that's considered non-performing. So if they've missed 3 consecutive payments, that's a non-performing note. Oftentimes it's not unusual that I'll buy a note where they haven't made a payment for 2 or 3 years. And that we see that kind of thing on a regular basis. That's not unusual at all. And then you get into all that kind of discussion of, well, why would you pick it up then after they haven't made payments for that long? And then that's a different strategy, and that's for a different conversation. But there's so many ways you can do it. That's what makes it interesting for me.
That's great. That's great information.
So you're not wrong. There's all kinds.
Okay, no, that's good. Like I said, I just because we were going back and forth, I want to just make sure, at least we get on the same page, so I wasn't misleading anybody.
Yeah.
I guess, Eric, are there any questions in the queue right now?
There are not. So if that's all from you guys today, we can end there. As I said earlier, the presentation is going to be available on our website for on-demand viewing, probably in the next 24 hours. So with that said, Scott, why don't you share your contact information really quickly, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure. My email is Scott R, SCOTTR @nextgenerationtrust.com. That's one word, nextgenerationtrust.com. Actually, if you can drop that in the chat box, Eric. Also 973-533-1880 is our switchboard. Like I said earlier, we're all coming back to the office after somewhat of a remote experience. So that's our main switchboard line, 973-533-1880. And someone in our office, myself, my colleague Jack or Erica, would be happy to help.
Awesome. Alrighty, with that said, that concludes today's presentation. Nathan, thank you for joining us and providing us with excellent information. And Scott as well, thank you. Hopefully we'll see you guys on the next one, and have a good day.
Great, thank you.
Take care, everyone. Thank you. Great job, Nathan.